Hi, this is Helen from the Heart of Hospice podcast. November is National Hospice and Palliative Care Month and also National Family Caregivers Month. In recognition, we're featuring a lineup of guests that includes a millennial caregiver, a palliative care chaplain, a hospice nurse who's a TikTok influencer, and a palliative care physician turned documentary filmmaker. Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, there's something to learn and something to inspire you. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Heart of Hospice podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services. When you need information about hospice, Hospice Navigation Services is here to help. An expert navigator will answer your questions about end-of-life care and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care. It's your journey. We can be your guide. Visit hospicenavigation.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today.
Today's episode features social workers Lisa Pahl and Jessica Empeno in a conversation about end-of-life wishes when there's a dementia diagnosis. Jessica Empeno is a medical social worker with 25 years' experience in nonprofit and healthcare organizations, and her work is focused mostly on dementia, end-of-life care, and community programs. Jessica is currently the National Director of Clinical Engagement with Compassion and Choices, where she leads education and advocacy efforts across the U.S. to improve care, expand options, and empower everyone to chart their end-of-life journey. My other guest today is Lisa Pahl. She's the CEO and owner of the Death Deck LLC, a company that creates engaging tools to spark meaningful conversations about life, death, and everything in between. Lisa is a licensed clinical social worker with over 18 years of experience in hospice care and 8 years in emergency medicine. She brings compassionate expertise to helping individuals navigate illness, dying, and grief, and she's dedicated to empowering people to talk openly about what truly matters. Lisa is a return guest to the podcast. Jessica is new to us, and we had a fantastic conversation. They share how the Dementia Deck idea got started and why there is such a need for more conversations about dementia. After hearing so many caregivers say things like, I know this is not how they would want to live, and how can I keep this from happening to me? Jessica and Lisa felt a need to create something that would help spark those conversations. The Dementia Deck goes beyond just the usual advanced care planning questions. It also includes questions related to emotional support. Jessica and Lisa talk about which of the cards is their favorite and which one they think might be the most challenging for caregivers to use. Lisa also talks about the Dementia Directive that's available on the Compassion and Choices website. It is the Dementia Values and Priorities tool, and it's available for free download in multiple languages. You can either print it or use it online. The deathdeck.com is the website to purchase your Death Deck or Dementia Deck, and the website for Compassion and Choices is compassionandchoices.org. Stick with me all the way to the end of this conversation. It really is a great one. There's a lot to learn. Jessica and Lisa, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast. It's so great to have you guys here with me.
It's so great to be here.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa, you are a pro at this. You're a veteran. You've been on the show numerous times. It's great to have you back on. And Jessica, I'm so happy to welcome you to the Heart of Hospice podcast. It's going to be a great conversation because we are talking about advanced care planning and end-of-life conversations, and we are talking about the brand new Dementia Deck, which I guess we could say is the sister deck or part of the Death Deck family that you got going. So we're so excited for the deck. We think it's got a lot of great possibilities. So for your icebreaker question that I like to sneak in on people, I want to ask you one of the questions from the Dementia Deck. So, Jessica, we're going to start with you. If I have 6 months or less to live, A, bring on hospice. I want all the help I can get. B, continue taking me to the hospital. I want to live as long as possible. Or C, my decision maker can decide they will know best.
Definitely going to go with A. As soon as I can, I want the support of hospice to come in and just wrap their arms around me and my family.
Awesome. If you had answered anything else, I think you probably would have gotten some heat on the Heart of Hospice podcast.
So it was a trick question, Helen, is that?
Yeah, there was a right answer on
Somehow
that
I
one.
knew
Let's
that.
face it. Yeah, you could feel it. Okay, Lisa, here's yours. If I'm unable to safely swallow food or drink, A, give me a feeding tube. I want to live as long as possible. B, that's my body's way of letting go. Listen to it. Or C, it depends on how I'm doing otherwise.
B. B for
Okay.
me. I do not want a feeding tube placed if I am living with dementia. It's something that I've witnessed so many families struggle with that decision. And I know it can be a hard decision for families, but we know that the body's natural disease progression and the way that we approach end of life with dementia is that we lose the ability to swallow. And that's a normal part of the disease progression. And that's basically how we can pass is no longer consuming food or nutrition. Mm-hmm.
It really is a hard topic for a lot of families, though. That's a very sticky, very emotional topic. And families really struggle with that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. I think when we've had patients on hospice with a feeding tube, or they're on palliative care with a feeding tube, it's similar in a sense to a ventilator in some capacity, in the sense that it's so much harder to turn it off than it is to not put it in place in the first place. And we know that with feeding tubes, it can often lead to people having complications from the feeding tube, having increased swelling, all of these symptoms that then the medical professionals kind of share with the family, like, we don't think this is helpful anymore, but it becomes so hard to stop feeding if there is a mechanism to feed. But again, going back to your original point, it's food is how we show love, and it's excruciating for families to not be able to feed or provide love and care in that way. And so it is a hard decision. Mm-hmm.
I would think that it might even be a harder decision than the ventilator question.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a harder decision because it's food, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not super invasive. And a lot of people will tell you, I think, especially since the pandemic, people know I wouldn't want to be on a ventilator. I don't want a machine to breathe for me. Well, a feeding tube is different. It's less invasive. It takes less maintenance. It's easier to manage. People can have that in a facility or at home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a much more nuanced decision, I think, for caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I'm glad I picked that question. I think it's good. So those are just 2 questions from the Dementia deck, which is the new death deck is the Dementia deck. The death deck has been helping us to have end-of-life conversations for a few years now. And now you've got this one that's dementia specific. How is this deck different from the original death deck, Lisa?
Well, the death deck has 112 questions about all things death related. And with the death deck, we're trying to normalize conversations on death, dying, and illness. We're trying to help people begin having these conversations. It's a great tool for advanced care planning. It's a great tool to be able to learn more about your family and their wishes. However, in the original death deck, we don't ask questions specifically about dementia. And we know that dementia is a disease that people typically live a very long time with. And so we need to include dementia in end-of-life planning. And so we created the dementia deck to do just that, to help people really think through the type of care and treatment that they would want if they were living with dementia, so that their family members can have some more guidance in making decisions on their behalf.
Jessica, who ought to be using the dementia deck? And when should it be integrated in to a conversation about end of life?
Such a great question, Helen, because I think a lot of people see the name of it, Dementia Deck, and they assume it's for people that are living with dementia. But really, this is for everyone and anyone who is thinking about dementia. Maybe they are concerned about the possibility of dementia in their own future. Maybe they are caring for somebody that is living with the disease. They have someone in their life that is touched by it. And it's really an opportunity to normalize the conversation around dementia, because this is something that so many people are exposed to, or are thinking about, or are concerned or afraid of. And so we hope that this is something that everyone will use. The sooner the better. So just like with all end-of-life planning conversations, that opportunity to sit down with the people that you care about, that care about you, to talk about, what do you want when? What do you think about this, that, before you need it, before any sort of crisis hits.
So really, you're talking about early and often.
Exactly.
When it comes to conversations, early and often, which is any advanced care planning, regardless of diagnosis, early and often is the way to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So why focus on dementia specifically, Jessica? And you can respond to this too, Lisa, but why did you guys focus to create specifically a dementia deck?
I think there are a few reasons for us. Both Lisa and I have worked as social workers in the hospice setting for many years, and we've not only supported many families through life and death with dementia, but we also have personal experiences as well. We know that the research tells us that nearly half of older adults die with some form of dementia. I would venture to guess that there are far more that don't even have a diagnosis, that are living with cognitive changes. And in my experience, most people have either been personally affected by this disease or know someone who has. And it's a disease that impacts everybody, friends, family, neighbors, far more than just the person that is living with cognitive changes. And so in that sense, it's very practical, it's realistic. This is something that we're all talking about and thinking about, but at the same time, not enough people are talking about it. Just like end of life care generally, I think there is a stigma associated with dementia. There are a lot of myths and misunderstandings about dementia. And so the opportunity to create a tool that not only includes dementia in end of life conversations, but can help reduce the stigma and encourage people to talk about these really important things was a really exciting opportunity for both of us to partner on.
Lisa, why the elephant? Why the elephant on the logo?
Isn't she so cute? We went back and forth on the design. Elephants are known for having long memories, and they are also known as the elephant in the room, right? And so it felt like the perfect mascot for us. And talking about dementia, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the very cute elephant in the room. And let's bring dementia out of this secrecy, avoidance, fear place, and just begin having some conversations.
I love it. I love it. So I want to talk about dementia caregivers since we're talking about an elephant in the room, because I think the caregiving experience for someone who's taking care of a person with dementia or Alzheimer's, I think that caregiving experience is different. And Jessica, the reason I'm bringing this up is because you mentioned a stigma, that there's still, in this day and age, there's still a stigma. With Alzheimer's and dementia being the largest diagnosis in Medicare hospice patients and the fastest growing diagnosis in Medicare hospice patients, their caregivers' experience is different from what I've seen. What challenges do you guys see? And Jessica, I'll let you address this first. What challenges do you see dementia caregivers struggle with?
Oh, I think unfortunately the challenges can be so many. We are dealing with a disease that affects the brain. You can't see it. You can't see how things are changing. And I think that makes it a lot harder. Sometimes it's harder for people to have compassion because maybe the person looks the same as they did outwardly, and you don't know how things have really changed for them. And so, the challenges can start with even just getting a diagnosis and understanding what we're dealing with. People can go months and months trying to get answers about the changes, about being able to understand what's really going on. And then the way that it changes maybe your dreams and your plans for the future, knowing how and where to find support is huge. Fortunately, we have a lot of really amazing community-specific programs to support caregivers and to support people living with the disease, but it can be really hard to navigate that. And of course, when you're just trying to get through the day, it can also be exhausting to go out and try to search and find and make the call to enroll and find out what you qualify for. So, in short, really, life with dementia, eventually it changes and it shapes everything. And when you are trying to care for somebody you love and you're watching those changes happen and you're trying to navigate the world, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what's going to come next, how to plan. I don't know what this day is going to be like for us. That is extremely stressful.
Yeah. And I think, the ambiguous loss, of watching someone, ambiguous loss, meaning it's not a death, but we're losing someone that we're still who's still there because they're losing their capabilities. They're not the same person that we've known and loved, at least in their behaviors, or their abilities. And that can just be excruciating. One of my personal reasons for creating this deck is just hearing so often from people that they know their person wouldn't want to live like this, and how hard that is to see them in that condition. And then typically what the caregiver will then say something along the lines of, how do I keep this from happening to me? And so I think that, as Jessica mentioned, there's most of us are touched by dementia many times in our life, but at least, once. And we really are, it makes us think about our own future and what we want for ourselves. And so, there are these decisional moments that arise where there are moments that we can decide for comfort measures, or we can decide for more treatments. And, do you treat cancer if you have a dementia diagnosis? Or do you say, I would rather not treat the cancer because I would rather have that run its course than living with dementia for many years. So obviously we can't plan for everything. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what the future holds. But the more we just begin some conversations and really don't just shut our brain off as soon as a difficult thought comes up, and move to avoid it, but just kind of let ourselves think about it, and let ourselves think about our values and priorities, and, what is most important to us. And, the other thing that I want to mention is just like that we worked really hard to find a good balance with the deck, so that it isn't only about, the nuts and bolts, like, do you want a feeding tube? But it's also about, how do you want to live? And including some quality of life conversations, some questions that get at music and humor, and living with dementia, and how we can have meaningful times during our life with dementia. So we wanted to be sure not to just think about those decisions, but also how to live.
Yeah, I like that. How to stay connected, how to stay communicating with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. How to offer me comfort. And then some of the symptoms type stuff, like becoming incontinent, having big emotions, how to manage that, keeping clean.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of great topics. Lisa, when you look at caregivers for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, do you think that they are better at having these conversations for having the caregiver experience? If they're saying, how do I keep this from happening to me? I don't want to live like this. Do you think they're better at having these conversations?
I think they're thinking about it more, because they're living, they're living directly impacted daily by dementia. I think, are they better at the conversation? Well, we're trying to give them a tool to be able to have these conversations. I think, families will talk to me. I can think of this one conversation that I had with the son of a hospice patient, and he was really struggling that day, and was just like, there's just no way my dad would want to be alive like this. Like, he's spending all of his money on care. He's hasn't, made eye contact or engaged in any way in years. And I just, I don't want to see him like this anymore. And it was so painful for him. And so, in that moment, we talked about potential infections and how he had the option to treat or not treat the next UTI, or if he gets pneumonia, he has the option of not treating that for his dad. And the relief that he felt in having that information, and knowing that there are these decisional moments, right? That gave him some relief. And then in his very next breath, he said, okay, but, back to that question of how do I not get to be laying in bed for all these years? How do I protect myself from that? And again, there isn't any easy answer to that question. There's really not. All we can do is talk through with our family about our preferences for basically the question of at what point do you want those comfort measures? At what point do you want nothing? Some people even decide to stop taking blood pressure medication. Some people make decisions about, not seeing the cardiologist anymore at different phases with a dementia diagnosis. So there are these moments that we have the capability of making decisions for family members or for the person themselves. People in early stages of dementia can continue to make decisions about their treatment and care. We didn't design the dementia deck for people living with dementia, but people who want to have these conversations and they're living with dementia and they're wanting to be involved and they can participate. They are, the dementia deck is for everyone that can participate and wants to participate in the conversations. I do recommend that, just like with all of our products, that you look through the questions first and see what might be a good fit to use with a family member with dementia. And just knowing, just like anyone else, we aren't sure how people will respond when we ask some questions. And so being gentle, we have the open-ended pink ones, and they tend to be softer questions, the pink ones, that ask more about living with dementia than decisions. And I would recommend, starting with those questions and really approaching it from that angle.
Yeah, those conversations can get pretty complex. So if somebody does have any degree of dementia, better to keep it simple. Yeah. And, we talk a lot about end-stage Alzheimer's and dementia on the podcast, but for a lot of these folks, the dementia diagnosis is in addition to something that's another diagnosis that's the serious illness, end-stage cardiac disease, but also mild to moderate dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So it really can make those conversations super, super charged when you start trying to talk about, do you want to have a cardiac stress test? How do you act on the results that you're going to get? Yeah. I am loving this conversation, but we're going to take a break right now. There's more to come.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services.
If you or someone you care about is dealing with a life-limiting illness, you need a guide. Hospice Navigation Services is here to help you get the best end-of-life care possible. We understand the importance of personalized, experienced support. Hospice navigators provide one-on-one support over the phone or through video calls to guide you every step of the way. They'll answer your questions, explain what hospice care looks like, and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. Whether you're planning ahead or you have an urgent need, Hospice Navigation Services helps you and your family understand your options for end-of-life care. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care and get answers to your questions. You don't have to go through this alone. You deserve compassionate support and guidance for your end-of-life experience. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. To book your hospice navigation session and receive your free guide to end-of-life care, visit our website at hospicenavigation.com. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. Jessica, I want to ask you, when we're having conversations, end-of-life conversations, where there is a dementia diagnosis involved, what kind of topics do you think we ought to address? I mean, we've already talked about feeding tubes. Mm-hmm. That's a huge hot button issue for us. But what other topics should be sort of at the top 10 of things we ought to be discussing?
So what I encourage is, of course, we want to talk about all of the other kind of almost like a general end of life conversation. So we want to talk about things, what does a good day look like to you? What matters most? What brings you joy? We want to include those kinds of things in the conversation, as well as what are your wishes regarding, your final arrangements? How do you, who do you want to have present in your final days? Because I think that's important to convey to people that they do have a choice and they do have some sense of control about how that can happen. When it comes to dementia specifically, I think it's really important to be honest in talking about, but also acknowledging and understanding what changes the disease will eventually bring. And that's why we created a lot of these cards to include that. We wanted to help people understand these are the things that you might want to think about, you might want to talk about as you are thinking about the possibility of a future with dementia. So those questions that say, if I am not able to recognize the people around me, that's probably going to happen at some point in the disease. If I require 24-hour care, we know that's going to happen at some point in the disease. And so what we hope is that will spark that conversation about not only, wow, I'm going to need 24-hour care, and what does that look like for us? What are the options? But what do you want in that scenario? So I think really talking openly, being very frank about what is to come and the changes that you will see with the disease are really important to talk about when dementia is part of the picture.
Yeah, and not one conversation to sit down and say, okay, we're going to go through every one of these questions in the dementia deck, because those are some very highly emotionally charged topics. Incontinence, that's a huge dignity issue.
Yeah.
And caregiving for somebody who's bedbound, that's a big issue.
Yeah.
Because when people really, if they actually have a grasp of the amount of work and care that it takes to care for someone like that, I mean, that's huge. That's a huge discussion, maybe involving the whole family.
Exactly.
But all of these, you can't tackle them all at once. So, Jessica, I'm going to start with you. What's the card you wish you had included in the dementia deck? Was there one you wanted to put in?
I think we got all the cards in that we thought were important. I'm sure a year from now, something will occur to me that we probably should have included. But at this point in time, Lisa and I went back and forth on what questions should be included and what is the right way to frame this. And I feel really good about this deck that we created, because I think it does include the important questions and the things that we hope people are talking about. But if there's something out there that you think we should have included, please, we'd love to know.
I like that. Lisa's nodding her head, so I'm not even going to ask you that question, Lisa. Sounds like you got everything in there that you needed. Mm-hmm. Lisa, what do you think is the most difficult card to discuss?
Well, it's the topic that we just touched on. I've now had a couple game nights where we've where I've led people through playing together. And this definitely was the most charged, one of the most charged. I think the feeding tube question is a challenging one. And then I think this question, the idea of needing help with bathing and personal care, A, is dehumanizing and upsetting to me. B, feels manageable if done by a professional, or C, no big deal. Everyone needs help at some point. In playing this with a few groups of people, this seemed to be the question that people had very strong feelings about, and really thinking about who's gonna take care of them, and that's a big, there's the personal care of it, but there's also just, who's willing to do this for me? And do I have the finances? I mean, these are what, normal everyday Americans are wondering, how will I live with a dementia diagnosis, and how will I be cared for? And so I think that question really brings that up for people. And that is kind of the practical piece of this deck, is we need to be thinking about this. The longer we live, the more likelihood that we have of developing a form of dementia. And so, it's hard to think about these things, but when we do, we might make decisions about planning financially as well as having these conversations, because it does take planning. It does take planning for the future to have a future that is closer to what we want for ourselves, right?
Yeah, none of these topics are easy, that's for sure. Okay, Jessica, which card is your favorite?
My favorite card is, growing up, I was taught that dementia is A, something to be feared, please, no. B, something to be prepared for, so I better get on it. Or C, is to be expected. It will most likely happen. And the reason that I like this card is I think people don't always realize how the experiences that they've had in their life, the conversations, the things that they heard or were surrounded by as they were growing up, but also, things they see on television and in movies, how that shapes their perception, the way that they feel, the way that they react to somebody with dementia. I think people don't necessarily realize that. And so I love this card for sparking that conversation and helping people dig deep into, what do I think about dementia? What was I taught? What was that narrative that I heard? How was it talked about in my family? Is it something that we just kind of, laughed off? There goes, grandpa again being silly? Or in my family, it was like, this is normal aging. This is what's going to happen. It'll be you one day. I think those are important things. And when people can recognize that maybe that's the internal narrative that they have, it can help shape the conversation and certainly help maybe dispel some of those myths that they might be holding on to without even realizing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that stigma comes back to bite you when it comes to conversations, that elephant in the room, of course. Lisa, how can listeners connect with the Death Deck, the work that you're doing, and buy themselves a copy of the Dementia Deck and or the Death Deck?
You can learn more about me and all of our products at thedeathdeck.com. And I wanted to say one more thing. The Dementia Deck, part of this partnership with Compassion and Choices, was based on the fact that Compassion and Choices has a dementia directive tool called the Dementia Values and Priorities tool. And so, our hope is that people will use the Dementia Deck and have these rich conversations, and then we have a QR code included in the deck that brings people right to that dementia values and priorities tool, and you can put your wishes in writing. And that dementia directive can then be attached to your advanced directive. There's an electronic version, or you can print it out. It's available in 4 languages, and it's free on the Compassion and Choices website. So this is a joint initiative to try to help people be better prepared and really raise awareness and reduce stigma surrounding dementia.
Awesome. Jessica, if people want to connect with Compassion and Choices, where can they go?
The best place is compassionandchoices.org. Our website is rich with information and resources and practical tools that people can use in having end-of-life conversations, in developing plans. So in addition to the dementia values and priorities tool that Lisa mentioned, we also have other resources like the End-of-Life Decisions Guide and Toolkit, which is not only includes the dementia directive, but includes other tools to help prompt people about things that they might want to talk about, think about as they're having these ongoing conversations in planning for future healthcare decisions.
Awesome. Is there a cost for the resources that Compassion and Choices offers?
Not at all. Everything that Compassion and Choices offers is available at no cost to the community. We work really hard to keep it that way, and we just really want people to feel empowered to plan for the end-of-life journey that they hope for.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to see the Dementia Deck find its wings and for people to use it. So check out the show notes. You're going to see links to all the resources that we've listed, both the Death Deck website and Compassion and Choices website, and to the directive as well. So thank you guys so much. Jessica and Lisa, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having us, Helen.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes, and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.